But I mean, I think probably the major shift came in things like the stammering. The script I started with, the king at the end, when he made the final speech, was cured. I mean, he was Laurence Olivier. He didn't stammer at all. And Colin and I talked about this, and we listened to the actual real speech, which you can actually quite easily hear on the internet. And he clearly isn't cured. I mean, he's using pausing as a coping strategy to navigate the speech. And I felt quite strongly that I didn't want to make a film about disability that's about the miracle cure, because the reality of most people living with some kind of disability is that it's about learning to manage it and live with it, not really about wanting a miracle cure. And then having kind of embraced it, Colin and I kind of had that moment where he said, so basically you're saying there's not going to be a line in the movie where I don't at some level deal with a stammer, and I said yes, which is a kind of bombshell. But having embraced it, the upside of it is you get to the climax of the movie and you can believe in the possibility of his failure in the climax when that red light flashes and he goes live, because he's still in the middle of wrestling with it. And I think the problem with a lot of movies is when you get to the climax, you don't really believe in the hero's jeopardy. You don't believe in the possibility of a hero's failure. I mean, what Bond movie do you really believe that Bond could get hurt in the climax of a movie? And so it turned out to have a very dramatic upside to embrace the reality, which is that it was still a struggle.
Sounds quite mentally agile. And I'm curious if you were at all concerned as to how the broad audiences would respond to it?
Well, I had the privilege of being initiated into, I suppose, storytelling for the American audience through HBO, and I made 3 things for HBO: Elizabeth I with Helen Mirren and Jeremy Irons, then Longford with Jim Broadbent, Samantha Morton, Andy Serkis, and then finally John Adams, which I directed. And the joy of working for HBO is they never felt that they assume their audience is intelligent, and they never ever wanted to talk down to an audience, or they never asked me to simplify anything because they were worried the audience wouldn't get it. And so I had that rather odd experience of coming into American storytelling with a group of people who had tremendous respect for the intelligence of the mass audience, and seemed to be rewarded by it. I mean, we sold 1 million DVDs of John Adams incredibly quickly. And so, making the King's Speech, knowing that I had an American distributor and obviously wanting it to work here, I started from the point of view that the audience, there is a vast, clever audience out here, and that one doesn't need to kind of compromise on the way one makes films on this false assumption that the audience isn't bright. And I do think I owe HBO for that kind of that confidence, because I think too much is made on an assumption of the audience not being clever enough, and the fact that we've managed to fill theatres with people who enjoyed it, hopefully.
And also at Telluride, that first experience of seeing it with an audience, what surprised you?
She's referring to the very first time we screened it was a Saturday morning, I think on the 4th of September in Telluride, and I sat with Colin and Jeffrey, and it was the first time anyone's seen it, and the thing that most astounded us was the amount of humour in it. We had no idea it was going to be as funny, and we hadn't really, that wasn't really what we were trying to do. If you'd been a fly on the wall in rehearsal, we weren't sitting around worrying about how to get more gags in. And I think what's really interesting about the humour in the film is that conventional wisdom would say, for example, just before the final speech, and Colin says, "Is there any way I can thank you for what you've done?" And Jeffrey grins and says, "Knighthood." That's a huge laugh in any audience. And conventional wisdom would say, well, it's wrong to have it there because this is a very tense moment and you need to be ratcheting up the tension, and that would dispel tension. And what I discovered talking to audiences is that humour wasn't stopping it being tense. And I think the key is if humour is situationally accurate or accurate to character and situation. So in that situation, it felt true for Loeb to say that, because one, he was making a joke to try to relax Bertie. He was using humour to diffuse the tension in the room, for practical reasons, and secondly, he did quite want to know, and that was kind of what he was angling for. And so because you're not breaking the truth of either character to get the laugh can exist without breaking the tension, and I think that was. And I think going forward with my my next work, I'm kind of interested to keep working in this area where you can use humour and emotion right alongside each other, rather than that here's the funny scene, here's the serious.
That requires an incredibly adept mastery of tone, which I think is very difficult for a director to achieve, and it's stunning. It leaps off the screen in this movie that the tone is never a distraction in this film. Did you approach it knowing I want to make this happen this way and this happen in this way, or did that just sort of evolve in the development process?
I think that, possibly the tone of, I remember when Guy Pearce came on board and he phoned me from Australia and he said, I don't really understand whether the tone, this film could be all very tongue-in-cheek and a bit silly, or it could all be kind of incredibly earnest and serious, and it could go both ways in which do you want it to be. And I said it needs to feel very real, and there is wit in it, but it needs to be grounded in reality. And I think that was probably the route I took. But I think tonally things always evolve. And one of the interesting things about directing is, however much you pre-visualize, however much you try and control the outcome, the day you sit down in the editing room a week after you finish shooting and watch your movie, it has become something else. It's become something slightly different from what you imagined it to be. And the key thing at that moment is to start serving what it's become, rather than holding on to what it might be. It was, and you need to start understanding. A set of dynamics have been created almost independent of you in some cases. And you need to start serving that and honing that to make the film really good. And so there is always a process of kind of letting go of some preconceptions in order to allow in what's good that's come kind of serendipitously, or just out of the process of collaboration.
We're going to wrap up, so with one last question. What is your favorite moment, either from preparing or production or post or screenings, from this entire experience?
It's probably the first day of the shoot. The first day of the shoot, we filmed the first scene where the two men meet, where Colin Firth and Geoffrey Rush meet. It was a 10-minute scene in one day, which gives you an idea of how low the budget was on this film. Because 10 minutes in a day is pretty onerous. But after the street rehearsal, I started with that because I wanted some of the nerves of the first day of the shoot to percolate into the nerves of the two actors on this first meeting. And not only did I start with it, I started with Colin's close-up, or medium close-up, which is a 10-minute shot, around the length of the whole magazine, which was quite tough on him. That I wanted him to feel really under pressure, because I felt that sense of, and I shot him quite close, the camera was literally that far away from him, and as I wanted him to feel that sense of scrutiny, which is kind of similar to Stammer. But when I saw that performance that he was producing, which you can see in that scene, and how completely inside the Stammer, and how inhabited, how much he was having that role on the first day, I felt, first of all, fantastic about the experience, but I also, I kind of had that low moment, because to me, the other thing that makes this film personal is a lot about Lionel Loeb in a way that it's a lot about what I think about directing, and Loeb's relationship with Bertie is in many ways a director's relationship with an actor. And the thing about working with the truly greatest actors is there comes a moment which is exactly like the moment in the scene at the end. The scene at the end, Loeb is conducting Bertie, and he's with Bertie, he's mouthing to Bertie. There comes a point where he stops, his arms go by his side, all his direction falls away, and he's suddenly just a listener. He's suddenly just a viewer, and he's an audience member, and he's just absolutely astounded by what he's witnessing, and he's moved. And with the greatest actors, that's what happens as a director. That you're directing, you're in intimate discussions with an actor, and there comes a moment where you're suddenly thrown back and you're a viewer marveling at an amazing performance, and you're not directing anymore, because it's somehow transcended it. And that low moment happening on the very first day with Colin Firth, so extraordinary is what he did.
Well, it's an amazing achievement, and I'm sure it's going to be hearing a lot about it in January, February. So congratulations and thank you.